I think we have a lot of people that have started to join now, so it's a good time to get started. I do want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded, and the recording will also be made available to all. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our webinar. The title of our webinar is the International Year of Millets, Harnessing Ancestral Knowledge Systems for Food Sovereignty. The webinar is co-organized by WFP's Program, Humanitarian and Development Division, which is based in Rome headquarters, and the World Food Program India Country Office. The webinar is going to be held in English, in the English language. However, if you will see an icon on the right-hand side of your screen, which says more, and there you can click, and you will see that the session is transcribed, and you can also select a language for translation. So, my name is Alejandra Pirro, and I am the World Food Program's Global Indigenous Peoples Advisor. I am in the Humanitarian and Development Division, and I will be co-moderating this webinar with my colleague Aradhana Srivastava, who is the Gender and Inclusion Officer from the India Country Office. Today, we are celebrating the International Year of Millets and also the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. We have organized this webinar to bring visibility to the role ancestral knowledge systems and practices play in the cultivation, production, and consumption of millets. Our webinar today will focus on the experiences of millet use among Indigenous, tribal, and marginalized social groups in India and Australia as a pathway towards sustainable, inclusive, and resilient food systems. We are also going to highlight the potential of South-South triangular cooperation in sharing and promoting the adoption and scaling up of sustainable millet value chain development, leveraging Indigenous people's knowledge and expertise. The webinar is divided into 3 parts, and after each section, we're going to open the floor to questions and answers. However, before we start, I will share some basic housekeeping rules. So for the presenters, will the non-speaking presenters please keep their mic on mute? And then in case you are disconnected during your presentation, just reconnect again and we'll get you back online. And we kindly ask that each presenter keep to the time that we have slotted for you. And for all the participants that are joining us today, the questions, we kindly ask that you put them through the chat only. So please post your questions there, and we will take your questions after each of the set of presentations. But in your question, kindly include your name and your organization, and let us know who you will be directing your question to. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor to Ms. Nozomi Hashimoto, who is the World Food Program's India Deputy Country Office, for some introductory remarks. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody. I welcome all of you to this important webinar on the International Year of Millets, Harnessing Ancestral Knowledge Systems for Food Sovereignty. First of all, let me also follow Alejandra's practice and introduce myself. As everybody heard, my name is Nozomi Hashimoto. I am the Deputy Country Director of WFP India Office. Our Director, Elizabeth, was very much willing to join and then welcome you by herself. And she was very much planning to do so, but she's now in Odisha state, and some last-minute change of her scheduling didn't allow her to do this job. So allow me to welcome all of you on her behalf. Now, WFP globally is often known for the humanitarian food assistance, but across the globe, WFP is also very much committed and engaging to achieve long-term sustainable food nutrition security. And this event is very much aligned to our goal in this regard. Now, the global food security is increasingly under the threat as we speak right now, as the extreme weather events, temperature fluctuations, and unpredictable rainfall patterns all encroach on our lives. In this context, the ancestral knowledge owned by the indigenous and the tribal population has become immensely relevant, as it may hold solutions to the burning issues such as our food system issue challenge under the climate change context. At the same time, millets has emerged as a resilient crop in this context, requiring little moisture and growing even on marginal lands. The nutritional benefits of millets also add to the desirability as the grain of choice among the communities. However, millets have been recently slightly displaced in favor of other major crops, such as the wheat and the rice, maybe due to the changing taste preferences and also the advent of the modern farming. The International Year of Millets that we are celebrating this year helps promote millets as one of the solutions to address growing hunger and malnutrition around the world. Millets are especially valuable for the vulnerable and marginalized groups, including the indigenous population, who can harness the traditional knowledge and reintroduce millets as part of their family's diets. In this context, the traditional knowledge around the millets owned by this group of people, whether to do with growing techniques or processing techniques, are essential to support the food sovereignty for all. Furthermore, the relevance of South Triangular Cooperation is evident on this context, as this is an instrumental setup to facilitate the exchange of best practices and lessons between different countries. It is therefore a great honor to be able to work in India on this important topic. And I'm very happy to see WFP's strategic partners from India are on this webinar today, including from the government of Odisha. Thank you so much for all of you joining today. I very much look forward to hearing the deliberations in today's webinar from all the speakers. And I am sure that your reflections will show us a way forward towards wider millets cultivation and the use, informed by the knowledge presented by the indigenous communities as well. So thank you very much once again. Welcome on board, and I hand back over to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those introductory remarks and for setting the stage for today's webinar. Thanks again. So now we will begin our first set of presentations, which will focus on experiences from the field. And our guiding question for this set of presentations is, what has been the role of Indigenous traditional knowledge systems in millet cultivation and its effects on community sustainability? We are going to first hear from Ms. Santoshi Srilaya from the Deccan Development Society, which is a grassroots organization in Telangana, India. DDS, as it is known, is working with nearly 5,000 Dalit and Indigenous women farmer village level voluntary associations. The Deccan Development Society promotes and revives local and traditional knowledge in farming and seeds and advocates for the inclusion of this knowledge in the public food policy systems. Laya, who will be speaking first, will be joined by Ms. Lakshmama and Ms. Chandramama, who are community leaders, organic farmers, senior seed keepers, and influencers in Deccan Development Society. They will speak in Telugu, and Laya will also be translating. So over to you, Laya, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for that introduction, Alejandra. And good afternoon, everybody from India. So, we are speaking from Fastapur, a village in southern India. And as said by Alejandra, we are speaking from the office of Deccan Development Society. So DDS began its operations around 40 years ago in this place when it was quite impoverished and was just a semi-arid area, and the women barely came out of their homes to speak. It was only to work in the fields. In such context, DDS formed local village level collectives of women and harnessed their knowledge about what can be done for their own livelihood development, and with this has formed many landmark programs that have been scaled and replicated by other CSOs and other governments at different levels. And an important distinction about DDS was that around 40 years ago in drylands, development programs only meant skilling farmers for high productivity farming or pushing them towards commercial monocrops. That was sort of the attitude about development in dryland farming, that these are just bad lands and farmers need to shift to high productivity or maybe should just move towards industrialization. This was the idea. But during that time, when that was the mainstream idea of development in drylands, DDS was able to take a completely different approach, which is being talked about now by using the local knowledge and talking about millets 40 years ago when it was still very small. Uh, it was being marginalized a lot. So we have Chandrama and Lakshmama here, who were one of the women who were instrumental in guiding DDS towards what it is now. So I think it is better if we hear in their own words about how they were guiding DDS and how they did guide and how they are guiding us now. సో చంద్రమ్మ నేను ఇట్లా చెప్తున్నాను అనమాట. డేడియాస్ అనే సంస్థ అప్పుడు ఎవ్వరు చిరుధాన్యాల గురించి మాట్లాడినప్పుడు మనం మాట్లాడినాం వాటి గురించి అని. అయితే 40 ఏళ్ళ ముందు ఎవ్వరు చిరుధాన్యాలు అనే దాన్ని గుర్తించినప్పుడు డేడియాస్ అన్నది ఎట్లా గుర్తించారు?
అయితే డిడిఎస్ ఎట్లా గుర్తించిందంటే, మేము ఆడోళ్ళము పేదోళ్ళము. అయితే ఆడోళ్ళం పేదోళ్ళము ఈ ఇవి సిరిధాన్యాలే పెట్టేటోళ్ళం. ఇవి చిన్న పంటలు, చిన్న భూములు, గట్టు భూములు, ఎర్ర భూములు, ఇవి అన్ని ఇట్లాంటి భూమిలో దీనికి లాగోడు లేని పంట అని సిరిధాన్యాలు గట్లకు లాగోడు లేకుండా, ఎరువు లేకుండా, నీళ్లు బోరింగులు లేకుండా అట్లాంటి పంటలు పేదోళ్ళ పంటలు అని మేము పెట్టుకున్నామమ్మ. డిడిఎస్ గుర్తించింది మరి ఈ పంటల గురించి. ఆడోళ్ళ పంట ఎట్లా అంటే, ఆడోళ్ళము పేదోళ్ళం, పేదోళ్ళ పంట ఆడోళ్ళ పంట, ఆడోళ్ళే చేసుకోండి అన్నమాట. ఇదేం పంట? ఆడి పంట అనేది. మొగోళ్ళు ఏమదంటే, మొగోళ్ళు పైసల పంట పెట్టుకొని వాళ్ళ అక్కనే ఉడాయించుకుంటా, ఇల్లు పట్టకుండా, పిల్లలకు చేయకుండా వాళ్ళు చూసేటోళ్ళు. మేము ఈ సిరిధాన్యాలతోని ఇంటి గాసం జరగాలి, మా పిల్ల వేక తినాలి, మేము తినాలి, మా ఇంట్లో ధాన్యం ఉండాలి అనేది సిరిధాన్యాల పంట.
So Chandrama, can you hear us? Yeah. Yeah. So Chandrama was saying that the reason DDS could identify millets as a key solution for sustainable farming around 40 years ago was that it engaged mainly with poor people and with women. The poor women were the main, uh, the you could say that main audience or guides of DDS. So in that way, she was saying millets were mainly preserved by poor women, And there is an intersectional angle to this, that it was mainly preserved by women because women preferred to grow food crops and a variety of them, because it guaranteed that they always had food security in their home and they did not need to depend for seeds anywhere else. Whereas men, on the other hand, prioritized doing agriculture for money. That their concerns were more with the outside world, that let me earn money, let me buy things, and let me grow my house. So they were more relying on the market. But women mostly think about the health of people in households. So this was why women preferred food crops. But within food crops, millets were more preferred because she says that millets are a woman's crop and it's a poor man's crop. And why is it a poor man's crop? Because millets can thrive on any sort of land, mostly shallow lands and red soil lands or low fertility lands, which are usually discarded as non-productive lands or as wastelands. Millets can thrive on them, and it can provide a proper livelihood for the farmer, not just as a food but also in fodder. And it is intercropped with pulses and oil seeds, which provide the entire diet diversity to the household. So, due to these factors, and with the factor that it requires no irrigation and it requires very little inputs, so all these factors have made millets poor man's friendly crop to the poor person. And why is it important to women? So, because of these intersectional points, DDS was able to speak about millets much long ago. అయితే ఇప్పుడు చంద్రమ్మ అయితే మనకి ఇప్పటిదాకా ఎట్లా సహకరించారు మీరు, మీ జ్ఞానం అన్నది ఈమె చెప్పింది. అయితే ఇప్పుడు 2023 అన్నది చిరుధాన్యాల సంవత్సరం అంటున్నారు కదా, మరి ఇప్పుడు ముందుకి ఎట్లా పోవాలి అనే విషయం మీద ఏం చెప్తారు?
అయితే ఇప్పుడు మనము 40 ఏళ్ల సంధి మనం చేసుకుంటూ వచ్చినాం ఈ చిరుధాన్యాలు. ఈ ఏడు ఇది గవర్నమెంట్ గుర్తించింది అనమాట. అందరూ ఈ చిరుధాన్యాల సమాఖ్యాన్ని ఈ ఏడు గవర్నమెంట్ వాళ్ళు అందరు గుర్తించిండ్రు. మేము ఆపదల సంధి చేసుకుంటూ వచ్చినాం దీన్ని. అయితే ఇప్పుడు ఇది ఆడోళ్ళ చేతులు ఉండాలి, ఆడోళ్ళ తెలివి మీద, ఆడోళ్ళ జ్ఞానం మీద, ఆడోళ్లకు హక్కు ఉండాలి. ఎందుకంటే ఆడోళ్ళ చేతిలో ఇత్తనం ఉండాలి, ఆడోళ్ళ చేతిలో పంటలు ఉండాలి. ఇది అందరు గుర్తించిండ్రు, అందరు చేస్తున్నారు అంటే ఇంతటితో ఇది విడిచిపెట్టకూడదు అనమాట. ఇట్లనే ఇప్పుడు మా చేతుల మీదకి వెళ్ళి ఇంకొకళ్ళ చేతుల మీదకి పోవాలి, ఇట్లనే పండించుకుంటూ పోవాలి, ఇట్లనే ముంగడికి తీసుకుపోవాలి. ఈ చిరుధాన్యాలు అంటేనే మనం ఎప్పటికీ దీన్ని ఇడవకుండా ఇట్లనే పండించుకుంటూ పోవాలి, ముంగడికి నడిపియాలి. ఇప్పుడు తరాల పొంటి ఇప్పుడు చంద్రమ్మాయి, నేనైతే ఇంకా మా కోడళ్ళు, మా పిల్లలు ఇట్లా అందరు ఇట్లా చేసుకుంటూ పోవాలి అన్నమాట. దీని సిద్ధాంతం అనేది మారవకుండా ఇట్లనే ఉండాలి అన్నమాట. అంటే ఇప్పుడు ఈ పంటలది అన్నమాట. ఈ చిరుధాన్యాలు మనము ఇట్లనే పెట్టుకుంటూ పోవాలి. ఏంటంటే ఈ చిరుధాన్యాలు మనం ఒక్కటే చిరుధాన్యాలు పెట్టకొచ్చిన మెట్ల మనము ఇంకా 20 రకాల పంటలు కలిపి పంటలు పెడుతున్నాం అన్నమాట. కలిపి పంటలు పెట్టుట్లా మనకు ఈ వాతావరణం చేంజ్ అవుతున్నది. మనకు ఈ ఏడు మిర్గంలో వాన పడలేదు, ఆరిద్రాలో వాన పడలేదు. అట్లా అని మనం పంటలు ఒకదానికి తోడు ఒకటి ఇట్లా అనుములు గాని, బెబ్బెలు గాని, తోగాళ్ళు గాని, మినుములు గాని, పెసళ్ళు, ఈ చిరుధాన్యాలు, సామలు, సజ్జలు, అరికెలు, ఊదలు, ఈ కొర్రలు, ఇటువంటి అన్ని మనము లైన్ ప్రకారం పెట్టుకుంటూ పోవాలి. అయితే కొన్ని ఒక 2-3 పంటలు పోయినా కానీ మన చేతిలో ఇంకా 10 రకాల పంటలు మిగులుతాయి అన్నమాట. వాతావరణం చేంజ్ల మన పంటలు కాపాడుతాయి. మనకు సిద్ధాంతం ఉంటది, ఈ పంటల పొంటి మనం నడవాలి, ఈ తిండి తినాలి, ఇది భూమికి మంచిది, మన ఆరోగ్యంకు మంచిది గుర్తించింది అని అట్లా విడిచిపెట్టకూడదు. మనం పండించుకుంటూ పోవాలి, తినుకుంటూ పోవాలి. ఆడోళ్ళ హక్కు, ఆడోళ్ళ తెలివి, ఆడోళ్ళ జ్ఞానము ఆడపిల్లల చేతులు ఉండాలి అన్నమాట.
Yeah. So I was just writing down the points that she was saying. So I asked Lakshmama about, I set up that Chandrama has explained to us how DDS has guided us in the past how they have guided DDS in the past for millet farming. And I've asked Lakshmama about how do we go ahead from this, and especially considering the attention that millets are receiving. And she says that it is uh, very nice that first of all that millets are receiving this limelight across the world from different governments. Earlier, even in our villages, people used to consider it as the drought food, and it was very people who eat millets were considered as very poor people. But now it has become such a status symbol that everybody is eating it, and this is such a good initiative, and definitely we hope that this will promote millet uh, cultivation to further generations. But she adds two things. That one thing is that uh, within this promotion of millets, you should not forget that this is primarily a woman's crop, and that local knowledge is what has sustained it for generations and generations. If you suddenly take only the concept of millets, the crop called millets, and change it to another commercial crop, then all this recognition is does more harm than good. And she adds that another important aspect that one is that local knowledge and control of crops with women. And another aspect that she adds is that the biodiversity in millets is something that should not be traded off again for its popularity. That suppose she was saying in this season the monsoon was delayed by almost 3 weeks, but still we knew we did not consult any scientist or any expert, agricultural expert. We ourselves knew which varieties could survive the change in season. According to that, we guided the younger farmers about what varieties will work with a delayed monsoon and what varieties can work during this sowing window. So she was saying that this sort of knowledge, contextual knowledge and local knowledge, is something that we hold. This is not something that should be lost in this frenzy of milletteers. And so she was emphasizing that while we promote millets, it is very important to remember that it is not just a crop, but the philosophy behind it, that it is a woman's crop and its biodiversity are very, very important to move forward.
Thank you, Laya. That's and thank you so much for those wonderful words and knowledge that you have shared with us today. And I think those final words of let us not forget women's knowledge and women's role in protecting and in enhancing the use of millet. So thank you very much. We will now move to our next speaker, who is Mr. Dinesh Balam, who is the state coordinator and also manages the operations of Odisha Millet Mission, which was launched in 2017 to improve nutrition at the household level through the revival of millets in farms and also on the plates of tribal peoples communities in Odisha. It is a flagship program of the government of Odisha. So, Mr. Dinesh, what has been the role of Indigenous traditional knowledge systems in millet cultivation and its effects on communities' sustainability? Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Is my voice audible? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thank you. So I will just broadly, briefly outline the principles and then we'll just scroll through the PPT so that in the interest of time. So first is that the Odisha Millets Mission, first let me acknowledge the efforts of the DDS and especially late PV Satish, who has played an influential role in also, reorienting our priorities about millets is not just about production, productivity, or nutrition security, but it's about the justice and equity to the vulnerable communities, and especially the tribals and Dalits and other. So first, let me acknowledge their efforts and their support in being the pioneer, to which we were, played some role later. Next slide, please. So if you look at the poverty areas of tribal areas of Odisha and the areas where used to grow millets and the rainfed areas, they often fall in the same place historically also. If you look at next slide, please. If you look at 40 years of investments in rainfed areas, if you add all of them in India, it is much lesser than the single year subsidy of irrigated areas. So what I'm trying to say is that 60% of the population is rainfed, 60% of area is rainfed, but total investments are very, very less. So it needs to be looked at from that prism also. Next slide, please. So these are the challenges of climate change. Next slide. I think everybody is aware of it, so I'm skipping. Importance of nutrition. Next slide. So this is what I want to understand, even from policy point of view, is that people often think technology, mobile applications, satellite imagery, all these are important things. But the single most transformation is the change in the cropping system and crop types. That is a transformational change. That's what the literature says, not the hybrids or technology and etc. So this is something we need to understand, because when you change a crop, you're changing an activity, you're changing entrepreneurship. So each crop on an average has 100 stakeholders involved in it, from its harvest, tarpaulins, and etc. So changing a crop is a single most transformation activity. Next slide. So this I think is what Odisha. Next slide you can skip. Yeah. So so the most important aspect of Odisha that you need to know is that Odisha is one of the most disaster-prone state. So out of last 50 years, only 3 years have been a normal years. So either we have a drought, or we have a flood, or we have a deficit rainfall. So this is a context which is also important for millet mission. Next slide. So this I will not touch. I think next slide you can skip. So now in this larger context of justice, equity, and the suffering and the climate change, this is the context in which, and the poverty, this is the context in which we made Odisha Millet Mission. First objective was, our objective was not to increase productivity, but to improve the household consumption. Our objective was to revalorize the food cultures of the tribal communities. Our objective was to conserve and promote land races of millets. For first time in the world, we came up with a system which has been talked since publication of Lost Crops of Income. And the post-harvest productivity and value addition are there. The most important thing is we also emphasized to ensure that millets become part of the poor people's diet. It becomes part of the PDS, ICDS, MDM, and welfare hostels. Exports and all are minor part. Next slide. So I will not get into details of it because it will take time, but simply let me put it this way. So we do everything to ensure we promote millet cultivation. So we incentivize farmers up to 5 years to a tune of 26,500 per hectare to take up millet cultivation. Just like the millet mothers of Deccan Development Society has mentioned, we are the first program to promote local seeds, native land races, and we also provide support. We also provide support for the local women self-help groups and collectives to make the local bio inputs from the local available materials instead of chemical fertilizers and subsidies. So a lot of it is built on the traditional knowledge and the agriculture and culture aspect of the millets. We are very gender focused organized mission, so we have a lot of investments in how to we supply tools and everything to reduce the drudgery. These are small tools, not the big tools, because we don't want to take away the agency of the women farmers, because the research has showed the higher the mechanization, the less will be the participation of women. So that has been the historically been there, and I will share some of the photographs regarding the other things we have done. Next slide. So another thing is that, as I said, typically in all government scheme, the land is an important criteria. So Odisha Millet Mission, the first thing where we said that the cultivators will be given incentive, not the landowners, because we'll focus on even the Forest Rights Act lands will be given to the incentive, which is very new, which has not been given elsewhere. And we will not let the department to select the people. We'll engage the local CSOs, local partners, local farmer to farmer extension will be focused on. So there is a ground swell, a ground level engagement, a village level engagement. That all these are learnings that we've taken from various people, including DDS. So there is a bottoms up approach to this framework. And then we have actively involved women SHGs and FPOs in the custom hiring centers, seed production and procurement aspects. Next. So these are some of the photographs. Next slide. So what we have realized is that when we did a once called participatory varietal trial, where we took a lot of traditional land races and we did the field trials, we are proud to say that we are the first state to do so, and we have scientifically established what the wisdom of the millet mothers was saying, that after trying out with 400 odd land races across PVT over a period of 4 years, we proved that there are a lot of local land races which perform much better than improved and notified varieties. And we did it scientifically following all the equip trials and the standard ICR data, so much so that even the ICR research institutes are now saying, yes, land races perform better, and they're coming on board for first time a seed system built on the custodian farmers. So local custodian farmers will be supported, provided support. They will produce the seed, their land races to collectives. It will be produced and supplied instead of seed corporation. So that has been a landmark initiative of Odisha, and it is the first time in the world this has been taken up. And I'm very happy to say that yesterday Professor MS Swaminathan was birthday, and he was somebody who had long equation. He was also very happy with these activity. Next slide, please. So these are the technical data, but I'm just showing that we did all the technical analysis. Next slide, please. So this we did the world's largest land race evaluation trial with around 300 odd land races with the and we, as I said, we have definitely proved conclusively after 4 years of trials with all the scientists of India. Next slide. So some of the custodian farmers of Odisha were honored by our chief minister, and also our custodian farmer recently gave their millet handicrafts to the prime minister, and prime minister's office was also very happy about it. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, what we have also pioneered is a small scale technology instead of large scale machines. So we miniaturize the technology and ensure these are there in every village and every household. The idea is that at every level where a woman farmer or a woman collective will face a problem, be it in the crop cultivation, they should be weeders. If they are doing a problem with threshing, the small scale threshers should be there. So at every level of value chain, we ensure the agency is respected. It is done. I will not get into numbers, but more than 1,000 such units are set up in all the villages. Uh, and we have a budget. Our honorable chief minister has given a budget of around 500, around $400 million for this mission. Uh, Next is that next is that we have also through women collectives we have started the branding and activity. So our Millet Shakti is a model brand now, and they are champions. And in last 6 months they have made a turnover around 1.5 crores, selling again not a very highly value-added products, but a traditional cuisines like arisa pita, mandia pita. These are all traditional items. So these are very famous. This we presented in the Hockey World Cup. So 14 countries representatives actually tasted this food, and they were kind of gaga around it. Next. And now we are planning to do it in every cities and etc. Next slide. Next slide. So as we said it, we are heading a value chain at all levels. So we don't want only urban people to eat. We want a small eatery at the Gram Panchayat level. We want at a block level. We want at a district level. So millet becomes part of the diet of the people. That's what we have done. Even the recent outlet at the state level was opened by Honorable Chief Minister. And as I said, in procurement also, we are involving women collectives, farmer collectives. They are part of the procuring the millet. And we have developed a very unique system called MPAS system, which will ensure within 72 hours, the money goes to the farmer, unlike the paddy procurement. Next slide, please. So in addition, we have also brought in millets in the ICDS in 2 districts with around 1.5 lakh children. We are giving Ragi Laddu in phased manner. Now we are going to take it up in other districts also. Honorable Chief Minister just recently announced that all the mothers, pregnant and lactating mothers, will also be given a millet diet. We are working on the logistics of it. So within soon in 15 tribal districts, they will be served with the millet diet in their midday meal programs and the ICDS programs. Next slide. So I think this is all not required. Okay. So next is that in for International Year of Millets, we had a previous slide, please. Five important vertical: millets and sports, millets and schools and doctors, millets, reorienting every aspect of millet mission to a gender point of view, millets and SDGs, and millets and tribes. Odisha has 62 different communities. You travel 100 kilometers, you get 8 to 10 languages and 20 dialects. So we are very proud of our tribal heritage. We are currently documenting the linkages of food and agriculture with respect to many anthropological institutes. Similarly, I will rest. I'll quickly go through. Next slide. So this is for Hockey World Cup. As I said, we had all the international teams have millets, and wherever hockey match used to play it, we used to have advertisements about millets with the tribal communities before the match and after the match. And we have done in all hostels. A lot of every sports event had a millet event along with it. Next slide. So we had, like, as I said, every village, every household we touch, we have done more than 15,000 such programs with around maybe a 1 lakh person days of capacity building and training. Massive awareness. We are very proud of a millet mother. So every village, every revenue village, we want a millet mother. We do a what's called a millet mother event, and through that they became the change agents from their local community, and we support them for next 5 years to undertaking these activities. Next slide. So these are events in the schools. We are now going to roll out a program within 50,000 schools of millet awareness. We've also roped in celebrities to undertake a lot of awareness campaigns. All these are state level film stars and etc. The icon that you see is Millie. Millie stands for, you have MILLI, it is millet. MIL is a Millie. Millie is our icon. So Millie is there. So one you see with the sports icon is sports version of Millie with a Dilip Tirke, or former hockey champion. One, we have a film Sambalpuri Sari version. So we have millets and handicrafts as a separate work also. So the film stars. Next slide, please.
Okay. We're going to have to start wrapping up. Thank you.
I think we are done, if I'm not wrong. Next slide. So this is only one point. So we came up with a recent millet song along with Ricky Cage and 4 other Grammy Award winners, combination of tribal artists and the Grammy Award winners. So people can watch this. They can type millet song Odisha. You'll get this. Next slide. I think we are done, I think.
Great.
Oh, I think these are not required, but yeah, please, you can close it. That's it.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And to learn so much about the extraordinary work that the Odisha Millets Mission is doing. And a range of activities, and this real emphasis of supporting women's agency. So thank you again. In the interest of time, we'll move now to the last speaker of this first section of our webinar, and I'd like to hand the floor to Mr. Frank Roy, who is the coordinator of the Indigenous Partnership for Agrobiodiversity and Food Sovereignty, known as TIP. It is hosted by Bioversity International, SIAT. And TIP promotes the work of Indigenous peoples' communities and their allies to defend and champion Indigenous peoples' food systems. Mr. Frank Roy belongs to the Khasi Indigenous peoples community of Northeast India, and he is also one of the founding members of the Coalition of Indigenous Peoples Food Systems. Frank, I hand the floor over to you with the same question. What has been the role of Indigenous traditional knowledge systems in millet cultivation and its effects on community sustainability? Thank you. Over to you. Frank, you are on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Alejandra. It's an honor to be in today's webinar. PV Satesh, who was the founder of DDS, was a close friend and from whom I learned a lot. And it's great to hear what the two members of DDS have stated this morning. The work of the Odisha Millet Mission is also something that is worth noting, and I think I'm very, very grateful for hearing what the wonderful work that they have done on a crop that has been marginalized and neglected for such a long time. As you said, I belong to a matrilineal indigenous peoples community of Northeast India, the Khasis. Millet has been our staple food for generations, providing us with nutrition, resilience to climate stress, and opportunities for making beer. We traditionally practice shifting cultivation and follow a nature positive food system. Food security in a family within the Khasis was measured by the size of the homestead granary, utiara as the Khasi called them. Such granaries were filled only with millets in the past. Seed selection, broadcasting, management of diverse millet varieties were largely undertaken by women, the traditional knowledge holders. The the amount of land that is allotted to a household is often measured by the quantity of millet seeds that can be broadcast. This ensured equitable access of available land in any given season. The fertility of the soil is important for women because when soil health gets better, their observation of the biodiversity around them and their storytelling also becomes more interesting and meaningful. Women particularly enjoy millet harvests and always play a joyful and even flirtatious roles during the millet harvest dance, even as men sing special couplets in praise of their contribution to a community's well-being. The Indigenous Partnership tip that I had in Rome was established in 2010 in a meeting held in Cusco, Peru. We initiated our work by organizing food festivals. They were held in Peru, northern Kenya, Mongolia, northern Thailand, and northeast India. They were essentially about celebrating the taste and pleasure of locally produced or foraged food, about biodiversity, about a community's sacred and reciprocal relationship with nature. They quickly became the rallying points around which indigenous identities were affirmed, connections made, and networks initiated. The first food festival was held in Meghalaya, northeast India, in 2010. A group of women from Nongtrao village, led by Kong Bivina, asked me why millet did not figure prominently at the festival. It was a rude awakening, and it started our journey of love and romance with millet. 1 year later, the indigenous peoples of Sweden, the Sami people, Slow Food International, and TIP organized the first ever indigenous Terra Madre in Jokkmokk, in a remote corner of the Arctic part of Sweden. Kong Bibina and her son and translator Pius Rani were participants. We shared a participatory video about millet in her home. After the Jokmok meeting, she informally formed a millet network with members of her surrounding villages. A few months later, they joined a seeds festival in Nagaland, organized by the Northeast Network, a member of DDS Millet Network of India. They brought back millet seeds and proudly distributed to their network members. These grassroots initiatives led to the establishment of NESFAS in 2012. Women like Kong Bibina and young people like Pius Rani became the bricklayers of NESFAS. Tip proudly reported about this community-led millet network at its 2012 Asian workshop in the Philippines. I'm often credited to be the founder of NESFAS. The actual inspiration came from Kong Bibina. Without her and her love for krai, or millet as we say in Kasi, NESFAS would not have been formed. In TIP and NESFAS, we therefore always sing, no women, no krai. Today, NESFAS is actively working with millet growers in 47 villages, co-creating community seed banks, millet processing units, agroecology learning centers, exchange visits, and introducing local, national, and international chefs and other contemporary knowledge holders as valuable partners. NESFAS and 5 communities have also initiated a pilot program of introducing seasonally available wild edibles into school meals. They are planning community procurement for the school meals through a circular economy approach. 6 species of millet are generally found in Meghalaya. Some villages have reported more than 13 species or varieties. They are essentially found with communities who are still actively promoting shifting cultivation and where traditional knowledge, values, and practices are still held in high regard. Millets are also found with other crops like beans, potatoes, squash, leafy vegetables, and perilla seeds, thereby improving the biodiversity and soils of the land. In some parts of Meghalaya, where transition from shifting cultivation has taken place because of external influences, community members innovatively incorporated millet on their bund system, a unique local form of terracing where crops are grown on raised beds for a period of 2 years and then left fallow for 5 years. Others have started growing them in home gardens. The key community message is clear. There are local solutions with indigenous people's food system, but discontinue shifting cultivation and millet, an important source of minerals, dietary fiber, antioxidants, and proteins for Northeast India, it will disappear. It has become increasingly important because, as you said earlier, because of the climate breakdown. However, our current economic and market systems of focusing on cash crop expansion, as said by one of the DDS speakers, and the uniform spread of rice as a stable food through our PDS systems have disastrously impacted the food, health, and livelihood security of our indigenous peoples. The good news, as was said earlier, is the heightened global interest in eating healthy, sustainable foods. But building standard value chains to commercialize millet in indigenous peoples' lands and territories will be another social, cultural, and climate disaster. On this Indigenous Peoples' Day, let us therefore affirm to work together to promote local solutions and to protect and uphold the rights of indigenous peoples to their lands, to their territories, to their food and nutrition systems as enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank, for those inspiring words, and for really emphasizing the importance of that these local solutions that Indigenous peoples and traditional and tribal communities provide can be a real benefit to all as we move forward in our threatened planet due to due to climate variability. So I will now hand the floor to my colleague Aradhana Srivastava to open the floor to questions and a bit of discussion now as we conclude this first section that has really been wonderful in terms of amplifying these examples from the field. So Aradhana, over to you, and we do encourage all our participants to share their questions in the chat.
Thank you, Alejandra, and hello, everyone. So this has been a really very informative and stimulating first section of the webinar. It was wonderful to hear the experiences of our community women from Deccan Development Society. It was very educational, and I think all of us really gained the understanding of the connection between women and the land and how that translates to this unique traditional knowledge of millets, which is really nurtured by the women more as, a food security kind of a measure vis-a-vis men. Um, it's also very the whole story of women in the Northeast and how they have taken forward this millets initiative is also something very educational. And I really hope that in other regions as well, the example of Odisha Millet Mission, which was so inspiring, is replicated. And we have more such measures being taken where we see communities and the governments coming together to really maximize the production and utilization of millets. In terms of questions, I don't see many in the chat. There was one request from Rajshri Kanungo about whether any publications were available from Deccan Development Society, which I think has been answered by Girdhar, who says that she could refer to the website ddsindia.com. There is another request for presentations. With the permission of the presenters, we would probably be able to share them. There is one question by Pamela Del Canto from RBB WFP. Is there a plan to introduce millet in school feeding? So interesting because it is so rich in protein and iron, for example. Um, I would request either of the presenters to please take this question. Or Pamela, is it for specifically someone you could just type in the chat? Um, okay, either of the three presenters could take this question, please. I think Odisha Millet Mission did mention that there was this whole plan of including it in the school feeding program.
So as of now, we have approval for the schemes that involve in the pregnant and lactating mothers and the Anganwadis. There are some Anganwadis and schools that are combined. So that we are already doing. In the midday meal scheme of the government of India, right now we have been able to do on a pilot basis in one district in Kionjar. But we want to scale it up, but there are issues with specifically because Odisha we have ragi. Ragi is like a wheat; it becomes a flour, whereas a midday meal is a rice. So the kind of systems that you have in terms of where traditionally in a rice consumption, giving it in the millet, there are some issues there. So we're trying to work out. That's part one. But we see there's a greater chance of including in the pregnant and lactating woman as a THR, and also it's more targeted. We are planning to do it in the nutrition rehabilitation centers where the not so nutritionally well off mothers would come. Then we are focusing on the tribal hostels. The tribal hostels also is something we have in our plan. So these three things are there. The midday meal will take a little bit time because of the traditional recipes given in the midday meal vis-a-vis the traditional grain that is there. Like if you take Telangana, like as Deccan Development Service, jawar is easier to bring it in MDM compared to ragi. In terms of the grain and etc. But yes, we have plans, but midday meal may not be the primary focus. Pregnant, lactating women, school, early children, tribal students, then the standard midday meal program.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Frank, please come in.
One of the issues that we notice in the work that we do is that in the overall development approach, our focus has been on the state, the government, on the markets, and very little has been recognized about the role of communities. So the work that we are doing, our focus essentially by the starting point as communities, then we link up with the government and with the private sector if necessary. So, and with that, we have done with wild edibles, where we've introduced in some schools wild edibles that are available with the communities. And we are looking also at possibilities of millet in areas where it's grown. But the bigger issue is how do we procure them locally? And we've come to an agreement with the government that we will try on these pilot schemes. And if they seem necessary, if the volume is big enough, then we will look into them as an aspect for further. But we are also looking at, as the Odisha Millet Mission has said, that we are also looking at the ICDS schemes and others where we are trying to see if that could be done, but with resources that are available locally rather than imported from outside the state or nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. There is a question by Dagang to Frank, again to you. This is thanks for the presentation. Any good examples using millet for school meals through community procurement?
That is what we are trying to seek at. We are at the moment focusing on wild edibles as a possibility. One of the issues that we face on the ground is how do we make an estimate of the wheat of the millet production within the areas concerned, and is it sustainable to do so? And if not, how do we overcome that? And that's an issue that we want to first have an experience, then discuss with the government, and maybe later with even international organizations, all because of our focus that it should be community-led at all times. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, please come in, Laya.
I wanted to share a program that DDS in fact did in late 80s and early 90s. So there was a program called Balwadis. This was prior to Anganwadis, when farm women said that they would like to have a daycare for their children while they were going to the farm. And within those Balwadis, ragi food and jowar roti were given. The program ran quite successfully for almost 2 decades until Anganwadis came in to state government and the necessity for Balwadis phased out. But millets are not given in Anganwadis.
Thanks, Laya, for that information. There is a question by Rajshri Kanungo for Frank. Is matrilineal structure in the northeast region of India one of the key factors responsible for sustaining millet cultivation? Can we look at it from a gender lens? Or if you could elaborate on it a little more.
I think that is millet is sustained mainly because of our matriarchal, matrilineal aspects. I always speak about it as matriarchal because there's another issue. It's not only the lineage. The land belongs to the women, and the land is distributed within the communities, etc. But there's the other issue, and that is which comes from the matriarchal part, and that is the value systems, the value of caring, of sharing, of nurturing, and the value of looking at nature as being a part of you. And these, I think, played a very important part. But there are challenges that are being faced. We live in a world that is essentially patriarchal. So our systems, because of government, because of institutions, because of international things, the patriarchal values have influenced. The economic system has also influenced. So there's a breakdown of it. But where these systems are strong, they are there. And I think the position of the Khasi women is still very strong compared to most of the others, and their sense of control of themselves, their bodies, and their systems is there. And millet, as you saw from our experience, was not me, a man who said, let's grow millet. It was the women who reminded us that in your festival, you forgot about millet, and that led to the change of mind. Yeah. So definitely, yes, our system needs to be promoted and protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Now, in the interest of time, we would like to move ahead with the next session. Vivek, I see your question, but hopefully we will be able to take it up at the end. Thank you so much. Rafi, yours also, please. We'll take it up at the end. We're just moving to the next section. Over to Alejandra.
Great. Thank you. and wonderful questions. And we do see, as Aradhana just said, that there are more, and we will have time to take them up as we move forward. So we'll now begin the second part of our webinar, which is going to focus on the following question. We have also addressed why millet. That has come up a lot in our first section, given the experiences that we've heard from these 3 wonderful organizations. But now we're going to look at how can local millet value chains be promoted in order to contribute to sustainable, inclusive, and resilient food systems. So our first speakers in this second session are Hannah Binge and Carrie Saunders from Indigenous Grasslands for Grain, which is a research initiative housed in Sydney University, Australia. The initiative undertakes studies on the use and production of native grains using ancestral and modern techniques. Work is undertaken in consultation with Aboriginal peoples and shared through public events across sectors. Hannah and Carrie are Gamilarai women. Hannah is a research assistant on the Native Grain team's Gut Health Nutrition Project, and Carrie is the cultural site officer of the Native Grains team. And as they have said, these native grains have been eaten by their people for thousands of years. Over to you. I don't know who will be starting first, so leaving it to you. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much.
Hello. So as Alexandra said, my name's Hannah and I'm here with Kerry today. I am going to turn my camera off though because the internet did cut out earlier. So I'll do that now. So if you're able to just go to the next slide, please. So I just want to begin with an acknowledgement of country. So Australia was colonised roughly 200 years ago, like many other countries were. And before then, we had over 250 different clans and language groups in Australia. So we're based in Narrabri, which is the middle of our Gamilaroi country. So it's northwest of Sydney. So if you see the little map down in the bottom right-hand corner of Australia, the little grey box is where our nation is. So like to acknowledge the Gamilaroi country we're on today and our ancestors that have paved the way for us with the custodianship laws and culture that was practiced. We'd also like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, who still carry our strong culture and values, as well as those who have cared and continue to care for our country. So it's only been in about the past 10 years that wider Australia has been acknowledging our First Nation people and language groups. So just pop on to the next slide and I'll hand it over to Kerry.
Thank you, Emma. Hello, everybody. So this is the introduction. We work at the Narrabri campus under the Sydney University. We've had a team of 4 and Angela has since left. We are Gamilaroi and Yularoi women. There are normally teams members in Sydney doing a lot of the scientific testing. In 2017, Indigenous Grasslands for Grain began with Angela Patterson. After engaging with the local community, we worked with Australian native grains on different projects like threshing, testing the nutrients, and seed raising. Creating data needed to make commercial available grains and sharing these knowledges with communities. We'll go to the next slide. How can local millet value change and be promoted in order to contribute to sustainability, inclusive, resilient food systems? Today we'll cover environmental sustainability, health benefits, Indigenous knowledge and innovation in contemporary settings, Aboriginal culture and native grains, and then questions. Bye, how are you? Native millet is environmental sustainably. It's widespread across Australia, arid to rainforest regions, as shown in the map here. Dot points of the native millet has been recorded in Australia. They are found especially on open and disturbed lands, also floodplains. Native millet is drought and flood tolerant, also controls erosions because of its fibre root systems that reaches up to 1 metre deep in the subsoils. It also has low input requirements in comparison to introduced species grown in a monoculture. There are estimates that Australian native millet can hold up to 65 to 85 tonnes of carbon per hectare in the soils. Native millet supports a living ecosystem with habitats for biodiversity, fauna, and microorganisms. Different plants and animals work together to make a healthy land caring for country. Go to the next one. I'll hand this one over to you, Anna.
So worldwide, Indigenous grains have been found to have excellent energy as protein, lipids and carbohydrates, also antioxidants, vitamins and minerals. It's beneficial for the cardiovascular and brain health and also development because of the polysaturated fats. It also has the potential to protect against nutritional diseases such as diabetes due to the large amounts of fibre and slowly digestible starches that improve digestion and gut health. So some of the recent studies done down in Sydney have found that the energies of the Australian millet compared to the wheat that's grown here is similar in total energy, approximately 10% less carbohydrates, approximately 10% more in protein, and double the amount of fat. So these are some of the foods that we have tried making at work. So we've got from left to right, up top to bottom, we've got a ricotta focaccia, we've got some date loaves, golden syrup cakes, bread rolls, down the bottom are Johnny cakes and a pizza base as well, and some biscuits or crostinis.
Indigenous knowledge and innovation in a contemporary setting. We hand harvest in surroundings towns. We only take the seeds, not the whole plant. And then we dry the millet out in the sheets in an open container. We use different machinery and think of how the ancestors processed the grains and try to replicate in a modern setting. For example, a small stone mill like the grinding stone. We also experiment with different machinery like the blower vac and found it worked on native millet. That's the blower vac there. Some of the challenges we have is having access to land for harvesting. Sometimes we're in public areas where native millet may have been sprayed with chemical. Also, the vehicles nearby the highways and some of the snakes. There is no machinery that have been made for native millet because there isn't a mass farming for native millet for human consumption. This is why we experiment with different machinery, such as the harvester and the blower vac. Ensuring all work is culturally appropriate and ensuring this growing space is Indigenous led. Protecting Indigenous cultural intellectual property, ICIP, and Indigenous food sovereignty. Go to the next slide. These are just some of the bays with the containers where we dry the millet out. This is a multi-thresher where it separates the seed from the husk. And this little machine here gets towed behind a work ute, and it's got brushes on it, so it just takes the seeds. There's no tilling. And we use some of the sieves to also get the millet clean.
Right.
Yep, so
Aboriginal culture. No, that's okay. So Aboriginal culture with native grains. So traditionally, grains harvesting and processing was a women's role. As you can see in the pictures on the right-hand side, there's a woman on the far right. She's winnowing, so that's one of the techniques that we still use to clean the grain, letting the breeze or using our breath to catch the dust, and some young girls with the grinding stones making the flour with the clean grain. So those two images on the left-hand side, one on the far left is what we call a coolerment. So it's a bowl, and it was also used for many other things, carrying children as well, water, food, salad bowls, all sorts. And as you can see, the grinding stones there. So our ancestors also used cool burns to manage and keep the land healthy. And old articles and recordings state that the native millet was a favoured one to eat by our ancestors, especially in this area where there was a lot of it around, and also depending on the seasons, if there was enough rain. So native Australian millet it's more than just a food, like many of our native grains, more than just a food. It carries stories and songlines and cultural practices that go right across our country. Also the teachings from the grains and how they interact with their environment and play a role in looking after the land. So this is an example of a cool burn. So it's not quite like a bushfire. It doesn't burn as hot, and as you can see in the image on the left, it's quite a small one that runs along the top of the ground, and it's putting all that nutrients and minerals back into the soil from those ashes and smoke. Yes, just thank you for listening and sharing as well. It's been very interesting to hear where these other countries are at, and hopefully there's a bit we can learn from it as well. And we would love to see our Aboriginal people here really benefit from our native grains, finding that sense of identity and culture again, but also health-wise, like a lot of Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples suffering from chronic diseases, if we're able to get them out there a bit more, really benefit everyone.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing, yes, those nutritional benefits, and then also looking at larger issues regarding intellectual property, ensuring that the work is Indigenous-led and culturally appropriate, and that this is more than just a grain, but that it carries stories and is highly connected with songlines and culture. So thank you very much for that, and for sharing this very other experience, different from that of India, but yet also quite similar as well. So good to see these different contexts. So we'll now turn our attention to the World Food Programme. And here we'd like to invite our colleague Damien Fontaine, who works in the Food Systems and Smallholder Support Unit at WFP headquarters, where he leads the smallholder agricultural market support and post-harvest loss reduction work streams. Damien, so thank you so much for being here. So please share your thoughts on how local millet value chains can be promoted in order to contribute to sustainable, inclusive, and resilient food systems. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Alejandra, and hi everyone. Really happy to be here with you today. Yeah, so I'll have a bit, I'm trying to have a global perspective here, so I'll be a bit more theoretical, but I'll really try to also come up with some concrete examples as we go along. But if we can move to the next slide, so WFP is very active on resilient food systems. Can I move the slides myself, or should I ask someone to help me? Okay, thank you. So yeah, so as you may know, there was a big summit on food systems. So there was a summit a couple of years back, and we had a stock-taking moment after 2 years, a couple of weeks back in Rome. WFP is actually, so the World Food Programme is actually the co-lead for the workstream on resilient food systems. And WFP, during that event a couple of weeks ago, proposed a call to action around 5 main areas to really promote more resilient food systems and kind of some specific solutions associated to that. I wanted to focus on 2 ones because 2 of them actually really highlight indigenous crops and the support to indigenous people. So the first one is to really boost the local production for local consumption and for export, especially of indigenous crops. And why are we doing that? We've been hearing it all summer long. That's because they are nutritious, culturally appropriate, but they also are often more climate resilient and ecologically friendly. We also push for promoting more agroecological and regenerative practices in farming communities, and starting from the communities themselves, engaging all people, but especially women and indigenous people in practices that replenish soil fertility, restore water resources, and promote diverse diets for their families. And we have other kind of 3 other areas linked to focus on post-harvest loss reduction, leveraging institutional food procurement, and also really putting youth at the center, and especially young women. So that's kind of really where WFP wants to put the focus on, and really also not alone, but really looking for partners to really push for a common agenda around these 5 themes. And I'll actually focus on a few of those moving forward. Maybe the first one is on leveraging institutional procurement and linking that to the kind of local production for local consumption agenda. And we actually have been talking, some colleagues or contributors during the webinar actually mentioned approach linked to that. But so WFP has, by its actual activities around food assistance, is actually creating a stable demand, usually for quality and nutritious food. So WFP is disbursing $3.3 billion of cash every year. And so that cash is kind of a new market, usually in kind of food insecure and vulnerable environment. And so, so the beneficiaries of that cash are expected to buy food on local markets. And so we can think about how to link that cash to actually local production and promote local value chains. Similarly, WFP is procuring itself. Sometimes when we are providing in-kind support, we are procuring $1.6 billion every year, locally and regionally. And we have developed a new policy on how we can leverage that procurement footprint to promote local value chain and more locally from local smallholder farmers. I think we've talked also about homegrown school feeding as a big opportunity to promote local value chain and introduce new crops. And so WFP is reaching 66 million children through its homegrown school feeding programs globally. And so that's also a big opportunity that we have. And then also we work a lot with private sector, like traders, retailers, and we can also really leverage that partnership to try to promote local value chain. So basically linked to that, we have developed a value chain model that starts from the demand. whether it's WFP buying, schools buying, or retailers buying. We generate this demand and we try to leverage that to promote value chain development. So we have developed a whole model around that with assessment tools and indicators and capacity strengthening methodology and whatnot. So it starts with identifying the demand. So that's the first kind of column on the left. Then we do a value chain analysis to really understand who are the main actors, opportunities, bottlenecks along the targeted value chains. And then we do capacity strengthening around different, with different stakeholders along the value chain. So with the farmers themselves, we help build the farmers to increase their production or produce in a more resilient manner. Also reduce post-harvest losses. We work with aggregators, usually farm organizations, to help them link the farmers to the market and sometimes also add value to the product. We work with consumer to work on nutrition education. And we work on the broader market systems like setting up trading platform, providing market information, helping kind of share information across different actors and coordinate the value chain actors, working on policies with government and whatnot. So we have a whole package addressing different needs along the value chain. And by doing that, we can, and depending on what we actually do and what type of value chain we work, we can achieve a range of different objectives in terms of economic development for smallholder farmers, building resilience along the value chain, resilience to climate shocks or to economic shocks, making the value chain more nutrition sensitive, or promoting more inclusion, for instance, really promoting participation of youth or women, but also of indigenous people to the value chain that we are promoting. So we have developed this whole model. If we move to the next slide very quickly, some figures. So we are targeting we are supporting 1.2 million smallholder farmers in 50 countries with this approach. And we working as such with 12,000 farmer groups. And so last year we have the farms that we have supported, they've kind of sold 16,000 metric tons for a value of 67 million USD. Maybe more specifically, if we move to the next slide, an example of how we can leverage that to actually promote millet, for instance. So as part of the global food crisis linked to the war in Ukraine, so food prices were surging, imports were becoming more difficult, and WFP really saw this as an opportunity to try to procure more locally and more locally from smallholder farms. So we started, especially, I'm using some examples here from Africa, especially in Eastern and Southern Africa, that are also usually increasingly exposed to droughts. We were trying to see if we can buy more locally instead of importing food, and especially importing wheat from Ukraine. So we have changed the food basket of procurement to more local crops, and we have actually substituted the wheat with sorghum, which is actually, but it could also have been millet, so it's a similar small grain. So we changed what we procure linked to the new context. And we've also then combined our procurement with a package of support to smallholder farmers in terms of supporting them in increasing the production and reducing post-harvest losses, and really then training them on new contract modalities. But so the idea is, I think different colleagues have been talking about that. It's not a WFP model, it's a model that anybody can apply. It's really try to leverage the procurement footprint that we have from school feeding or institutional procurement to really promote local value chain, and especially local value chain for beneficial, nutritious, and indigenous crops like millet. We have a huge opportunity that can be leveraged there. Then from another angle, and so that's linked to another call for action on promoting agroecological and regenerative practices. WFP is also doing a lot of work on building resilience and really adopting kind of a community-based approach to build resilience of local communities. Really starting from an assessment that is driven by the community, developing a joint plan with the community, and then implement activities. So in the Sahel, so mainly in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, and Chad, we have really promoted. So land is very degraded. It's very dry. Nothing was growing anymore. So we have actually leveraged the traditional knowledge of using half moons. You can see that technique here on the picture, to really generate a land, combining with organic manure, and then planting sorghum or millet in kind of those half moons. As part of that, we have rehabilitated more than 2,000 hectares of agropastoral land, and the yield of local communities in the areas that we work with have increased by a factor of 2 to 3, specifically for millet and sorghum. So yeah, I think that's I'll stop here, but like we try to link then those production to school feeding program. We do a nutrition education. We have an integrated resilience program around those to build the resilience of local communities. Yeah, stop here. I think we're a bit behind time, so but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
On this.
Thank you very much for sharing all the efforts that WFP is involved in terms of local procurement, supporting homegrown school feeding, and leveraging traditional knowledge, as you shared the example in the Sahel. In the interest of time, we're going to move ahead for our final section, which is also very important as we look at ways forward. So here I'd like to invite Mr. Dagang Liu, who joined WFP's Program Humanitarian and Development Division as Chief of South-South and Triangular Cooperation. The unit there in August 2022. He also has a lot of experience working in multiple country offices in Asia and Africa. So Dagang, we would like to ask you the following question. How millet production, transformation and use can be supported, adapted, and scaled up in other regions through South-South triangulation cooperation? Thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good evening. And also thank Alexandra for inviting me to attend this very important meeting to celebrate this International Day of World Indigenous People. I would like to start my presentation by giving a quick introduction on WP's work in South-South and Triangular Cooperation. Maybe this first slide. So South-South collaboration means the global South actually showing the solidarity and also the mutual help. So this means South-South helping each other. The important part about triangular cooperation is T. T means actually the UN agencies, probably the OECD countries, when they step in to facilitate that we call triangular cooperation. In that case, in WP, we also are a triangular partner under this big South-South and triangular cooperation. In the recent years, WP has been increasingly engaging STC in supporting countries to accelerate their progress on SDG 2, including through collaboration with other UN agencies such as FAO and IFA. As 2023 is the International Year of Millet, to highlight the benefits of millet, which can grow on arid land with minimum input and are resilient to change in climate, I will highlight a few examples of how SSTC has been leveraged to share expertise, technology, and more to improve the millet value chain globally. I will start with my own story. In 1991, I worked 1 year as a field officer at an IFAD-funded agricultural development project in a remote county named Qinzhou in northern China's Shanxi province, where yellow millet had been planted for thousands of years. I have learned and observed in my field visit that millet was a traditional food for breastfeeding mothers and also the baby due to its many health and nutrition benefits. The local yellow millet also get a big name after it becoming a rural tribute to the emperor more than 350 years ago. I recall I bought yellow millet as a gift for families and also friends. So believe me, I have a lot special fond of millet, and we are doing my best to promote millet production and consumption. Some examples of ACC being leveraged to share knowledge on millet include the UN India Development Fund, which WP will support 60,000 smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. So our unit actually that's access to the UN India Fund, where millet is included in one of the project there. So we are very happy to promote that kind of exchange in the millet. The other one, most recently, I think also Niti Aayog, the government of India, in collaboration with WP India office, also launched the MAP and Exchange Good Practice MEGP initiative, where publication they call Ensuring Food Nutrition Security in Climate Fragility and Disaster. The 31 inspiring practice was published. And this actually highlighted a lot of innovative solutions that have succeeded in addressing complex problems around millet production. And most recently, my unit, ACT unit, we also conducting a scoping mission called South-South Review in Madagascar. The South-South Review helped identify nutrition-sensitive food value chain development, including food bank and food fortification. Nutrition food value chain mentioned including millet, sorghum, and others. As a next step, it was proposed to integrate a learning exchange component on millet value chain between India and Madagascar as part of a broader SSTC partnership between the members. WP, we also facilitate South-South triangular cooperation through an extended network of centers of excellence in Brazil, in China, and Côte d'Ivoire. To share its knowledge and expertise, China Center of Excellence organized recently a seminar of climate change resilience building against global food crises, aimed to exchange insight on innovative approach for climate resilience awareness on national level policy in climate resilience building, supporting climate resilient crops such as millet, and encourage new energy, solar, wind used in food production, processing, and storage. This is a great example of South-South learning on millet value chain. Next, I think. Also, finally, this year, we also organize in partnership with Innovative Accelerator in Munich to give a voice to innovative country-owned solution from the Global South and launch the first ever South-South SATC Innovation Challenges. These challenges were designed to empower Global South nations to share innovations related to WP's mandate. It's aimed to boost low-income countries' response to global food crises, fortify national system, and establish WP as a credible SATC intermediary in the humanitarian development sectors. With over 40 applicants, 4 solutions were chosen. One of the winners is Solar for Resilience, S4R, initiative that was developed by the government of India with WP support. The S4R initiative aimed to scale up the use of affordable solar-based food processing technology for building resilience and livelihood of women and smallholder farmers. The project looks to provide women farmers with affordable solar drying technology to process and dry perishable food, thus reducing post-harvest loss. The initiative strengthens the capacity of women farmers in sourcing and processing raw materials, including millet and other communities, and building resilience by providing digital and financial training, as well as creating linkages to market. Number 5, yeah. As a way forward to mainstream millet value chain, the SSTC unit will continue collecting good practice on millets and share it on our internal South-South match knowledge platform that was designed to help WP country offices and regional bureaus find the right partners for their host government to tap into SSTC. And now we have included over 200 opportunities identified in 74 countries. To promote millet value chain development, host government can tap into different financial mechanisms, such as the UN Indian Fund, which I mentioned earlier, which and also the IPSA Fund, the India, Brazil, South African Facility for Poverty and Hunger Alleviation. Maybe also a good initiative also establish a dedicated trust fund to mainstream millet value chain. Looking forward, WP can support indigenous people by leveraging the intensive networking of country office, regional bureaucracies, and center of excellencies to bring awareness to and support for the sharing of indigenous solutions between governments. Acknowledging that indigenous people have valuable knowledge and tradition that may address the challenges in climate resilience, healthy and sustainable food system, and more. South-South triangular cooperation can also support government to becoming more aware of this solution and how they can be implemented and adopted to inter and international contexts. This will also help tapping into innovative approach to global challenges. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dagang, for sharing also your personal story with millet, the value of learning exchanges across countries. And we hope to see how South-South triangular cooperation can be leveraged to support governments and other partners to learn from Indigenous peoples and tribal people solutions as we move forward. So now I will hand the floor over to my colleague Aradhana. We will open the floor again to questions. We have seen that there are many that have come in through the chat, and then we'll move on to our concluding remarks. Over to you, Aradhana. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alejandra. There is a lot of interesting discussion also being put in the chat. So for those participants who haven't seen, it would be good for you to also probably look at that. Some important links also being shared there. So coming to the questions, there is this question by Vivek. The voices representing the indigenous people repeatedly mentioned the risks of industrialization of millets with respect to food sovereignty and protection of rights of indigenous people. What would be WFP's stand for checks and balances on the matter while advocating for national governments in abidance with the UN Universal Declaration to protect the rights and livelihoods of communities? This is a question open to any of the panelists who would like to attempt answering this. Okay, I guess nobody is responding here. I'll maybe move on to the next question then, which is by Rafi about whether non-millet producing states can, be a part of this expanding millet production chain. I think there has been some discussion in response to this in the chat where they say it's not a good idea. It should be homegrown and locally procured as much as possible. Maybe if somebody would like to add to it, Frank or Anyone from the Deccan Development Society, would you like to add to this?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question is whether existing self-help groups of non-millet producing states also become a part of this whole movement of women-led millets production. So where
Well,
millets is not really a homegrown crop, but something that can be introduced from outside.
depends on the ecological conditions there, depending on what sort of millets can be grown. And maybe it cannot be grown as a primary crop, but it could be encouraged as an intercrop. And there probably there could be some, could be the first step towards the progress.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, Frank, come in.
Yeah, no, I also agree with that because millet is specific to a particular landscape and to a particular culture, and that I think has to be taken into account. I think the Odisha Millet Mission made a very important comment that introduction of a new crop is not always an easy aspect to be taken into account. So if we just want self-help groups to commercialize on millet for the sake of commercializing, I think that will be a very dangerous trend. Millet essentially is for food security, and it should be on local procurement with local communities, and it should be circular among the existing groups rather than making it into a profit for self-help groups who may not have any knowledge or interest on that crop itself. I think that is which DDS made a remark in the beginning, which I think we need to, particularly international organizations. I saw in the World Food Program, in your policies, export of millet seems to be the thing. I would be very, very nervous of that policy. Thank you.
For instance, in Kerala, there is a movement around protecting the native rice varieties. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be that millets are the only sustainable crop, but following the principles of local crop cultures and food cultures is sort of the larger underlying message.
Maybe to react a bit to this as well from WFP's perspective, maybe I wasn't so clear, but we are not promoting to export millet. I think we were talking about import substitution in a sense that we are, instead of importing food, we are trying to buy more locally. So we're really talking also about local value chains. But yeah, then to respond to this, I fully agree. Like, we should not promote millet in an area where it's not known and where it's not going to be suitable for production. We should only promote it in areas, in local areas, looking at local and short value chains where it's part of traditional knowledge and where it actually can grow from a kind of more agricultural point of view. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Damien. Okay. I have a question from Kamal Kumar Rai, which says, how many native millets are there in Australia and what are the challenges related to native millet cultivation? And then secondly, can WFP has a program to support Indigenous farming and food systems? So I suppose Hannah and Kerry could take the first question on native millets in Australia.
Hi, this is Hannah here. So we've got two varieties of millet in Australia, though we work with one mainly, which is the one that was in the image of Australia found all across. We do have many other grass species that we work with as well. So there's quite a wide variety of native grains in Australia. But as we mentioned a bit earlier, our challenges are having access to land. So most of the farmlands are for wheat and cotton and those big commercial things. So a lot of our people don't have the opportunity or the knowledge due to colonisation about harvesting these grains and keeping these stories going. So that's part of what we're doing. We're trying to get it to a stage where our mob can access it, and hopefully our mob, and when I say our mob, I'm talking about our Aboriginal people, are able to really build, we're able to build ourselves back up with a sense of identity and learning about our culture, but also eating these foods that our old people used to eat, our ancestors used to eat, to improve our health, our whole well-being. It's really a holistic thing that could really benefit our people if we're able to get native grains going again in Australia. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. I'm jumping in again. Carrie, I don't know if you wanted to add to that. Over to you.
No, I think Anna said it all. Yeah. So yeah, and that's just where we're at the moment. So yeah, hopefully, work and engaging with more people in the community, which we have been. There's a lot of people that are generally interested in the native grains. For all the health and good reasons that grains do for our overall well-being and keeping the land healthy. Yeah, so hopefully in the future we can continue and just have them better outcomes and more progress, and yeah.
Great, thank you. I
Thank
do
you.
see a hand up, so don't know who it is. Oh, yes,
think it's
it is
Dinesh
Dinesh from Odisha Millets Mission. Yes, Dinesh, if you'd like to respond to any of these questions, over to you. Thank you. And then we'll be wrapping up as we've gone quite over. And I appreciate everyone's patience, but I do think this is a good opportunity for discussion. Over to you, Dinesh. Oh, did we lose Dinesh? Or is he on mute?
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. Over to you. Yes.
Yeah. So just want to put the numbers because somebody asked. See, first of all, we don't see because as somebody who's been at the forefront of this millet discussion for last 5-6 years, both state and central level. See, we have an estimated 12 million metric ton production of millets in India, out of which much of the millets produced is pearl millet hybrids and sorghum hybrids in Rajasthan and Gujarat. If you look at the areas, even assuming that people can eat hybrids, which is not possible, if entire India eats millets, we don't have supply for 2 days. So we are nowhere near production, supply, and other things. So one, I think one should be careful on how you are. You should not be too hasty, because I understand sitting in many of these meetings at senior level, they are trying to replace rice. The question now should not be at this point in time is not to say that we'll replace rice in any ways. For example, I feel we should prioritize. For example, we should focus on traditional food cultures wherever it is grown. You produce locally. So because the problem is, one of the policy suggestions from the government of India is just like green revolution, we'll produce pearl millet and jawar hybrids in the Gangetic plain, and then we'll supply to the rest of the country. I would advocate from Odisha Millets Mission, it's okay. For 50 years we have been neglecting millets. Let's have a 20-30 year plan. You don't need to do it at one go. Let there be local loops. That's part one. It's not just about millets, it's about the larger forgotten foods, nutrition, and sustainable food system. That's part two. And second, we don't need to directly go into PDS. You can start with, be it pregnant women, lactating women. So you don't need to say that my first goal is to supply PDS in the Mumbai. That need not be the case. Second thing is that there are around 1500 water stressed blocks in India where the water has gone to the red layer, so you do not have enough water, salinity is getting. So in those areas, if you want to go in non-traditional areas, I would suggest you should go there, because or else we'll be in a, that should be the first priority. So you can also look at the ecological disasters that are happening and see where millets can play a role. And let's make a 20, let this International Year of Millets begin a 25, 30 or 50-year journey to revive millets. Because if we are hasty, we'll not conserve land races, we'll not do cropping systems approach, we'll not talk about, etc. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thanks so much to the speakers. And again, in the interest of time, I think we move further. So I would like to conclude the Q&A session and hand it over back to Alejandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Aradhana. I think now we'll just, again, as you mentioned, in the interest of time, we will now go to our concluding remarks. And we are very happy to invite Pradnya, hold on, who is from the India, Pradnya Paitankar, excuse me, who is the head of the Climate and Resilient Food Systems Unit in the WFP India Country Office. So over to you, Pradnya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. It has been really such an incredible experience to hear from wide-ranging speakers. I mean, it really was like a very inspiring experience. I mean, some of you, some of the speakers were working so intensely with the indigenous communities, strengthening the millets value chain, and also, I mean, on the other side, the policymakers who worked on strategies, policies, and expansion of this traditional knowledge. And developing the value chain specifically for millets, which also benefits the indigenous people. So while we are celebrating this International Year of Millets globally as 2023, leveraging the International Day of World's Indigenous People to discuss, deliberate the strong connection and the interdependence of these ancient systems in preventing the traditions and securing the food for our future. And I mean, I think I was really it was so amazing to hear from DDS and from the TIP and from the Northeastern experiences, how these traditional food crops were really preserved, nurtured, and propagated for wide consumption despite immense drudgery and hard work and the adversaries, which is like echoed by multiple speakers. So in fact, we should be really thankful to these traditional cultivators as well as the indigenous people to have that biodiversity. Now what we are talking about, the climate change and the need for these kind of diversified crops. So when we are talking about emphasizing circular economies and strengthening the value chain, we see that with the climate change, it is really becoming more and more important. And so, in fact, working on these aspects of the circular economy or strengthening the local value chains, making the local, the global, is something which, in fact, can really preserve not only the climate, but also from the perspective of indigenous people's rights, their assets, their lands, and at the same time making their knowledge available to the rest of the world, which we actually have at WFP started doing through the exchange of these best practices and good practices, so that even if we don't export the food, export the millets, but we export the knowledge, how they are nurtured, how they are really grown, how the local varieties are actually preserved, and the experiences from from OMM specifically talked about how these processes actually were really implemented despite the pressure on monocropping and all, putting the focus on equity and justice, looking at the reducing the drudgery by introducing the simple machinery for the women, or having the policies which actually don't really go at scale without really much thinking about the rights as well as the local conditions, the climatic conditions. So all these things actually are extremely important when we are talking about preserving the climate and the planet. So in fact, also, I mean, one important aspect of WFP's work in supporting SSTC, which was highlighted by my colleagues, I mean, WFP has been working very closely in India, especially with OMM, in bringing out the good work that they are doing, the documentation of the same, and how those things actually, I mean, are so systematically done through multi-stakeholder analysis involving communities in strengthening the community structures and all. So there is an immense possibility of really exchanging this knowledge. In fact, there is a Institute of Millets Research, IIMR in Hyderabad, which has been doing more than 40-50 years the research around millets and really trying to bring it to a level where we have multiple varieties of millets. We have biodiversity restored where it is really lost. Looking at the potential for, I mean, the agroecological zones and those suitable varieties which actually can be really produced as well as consumed, so that the future challenge of global food insecurity is in fact addressed not just by replacing, as Dinesh was saying, by by one crop by other, but really having a multiple options. So if one crop fails, there are variety of other crops which actually are available for feeding the future population. Specificity of also, I mean, the millets in specifically growing in dry lands or needing really very less water or inputs in terms of let's say the fertilizers and all, they are extremely important. So as has been said in the end, I would like to really conclude with the remark that International Year of Millets and this today's day specifically highlighting the importance of indigenous people and their knowledge, this should be a starting point for that recognition. And there is a need to have a longer term plan to really develop, recognize, and appreciate the work which is being done in these small pockets, but at the same time, strengthening that and taking it outside so that there is more and more encouragement which in fact will benefit the people and the planet like never before. So I'd like to conclude here and really want to thank all the speakers for incredible comments and insights. I think hearing to everyone has been a great experience. So thank you so much, and over to you, Alejandra.
Thank you so much, Pradnya, for those wonderful concluding remarks. You've really been able to wrap up beautifully with all the issues that have been raised in the last almost 2 hours. So thank you very much. I appreciate you mentioning these challenges of making local, what is local, global, and while ensuring Indigenous people's rights, and also being very aware of the climatic challenges that we are facing today. So thank you very much to all of you once again. We're very happy to be celebrating not only the International Year of Millets, but the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples today by highlighting Indigenous peoples and tribal peoples' knowledge. So thank you all for participating in today's webinar. We will now close the webinar.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Oh,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Nilanja. Thank you,
Goodbye.
Pradhan. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
Roy.
Namaste.
అమ్మా.
Thank you.
నమస్తే.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye, everyone.